Okay, I feel like this is a really important video to make because I see so many people around me on a daily basis that spend 3 hours on one small lecture that should only really be taking them 45 minutes. I know it's so easy to feel productive and all hustly when you spend 14 hours in a library, but why do that when you can do a higher quality of work in less time and still do all the things that you want to do in the day? And the thing is, I'm a huge fan of studying efficiently, but the reason it comes more naturally to me is because I have a very different way of processing information when I come across it the first time. It has a scientific backing, and I'm honestly surprised that more people don't do this anyways. So in this video, I'm going to get into the nitty-gritty details of how I process and absorb information more efficiently, how I convert it from my working memory into my long-term memory, and how I create that laser focus whenever I'm studying. Most of you just open up that textbook and start going through it from line 1, chapter 1, flicking through. Bad idea. It's not a novel. It won't work like that. Usually when we're doing something for the first time, our brain isn't ready to take in and understand that information. That's why it feels confusing to read that sentence. It's because you haven't added the layers of foundation to support that new knowledge yet. If you don't have a reference or something to relate it to, you won't know how to think about it. And what we usually do is waste twice as much time rereading it, trying to just rote memorize it in our head. So what always made sense to me is to layer the information easiest to hardest. For example, don't just jump into why voltage ion gated channels have 7 subunits. No, that's like the 4th layer of stuff that you should be taking in. First, look at why ions need to be transported in the first place. When you're reading something, focus on how you organize the information in here. And the best way to do that is layering. This means that instead of linearly going through the paragraphs of a brand new topic, what you do is you go through the first easiest layer. The first layer of information for me is usually just skimming the whole thing for 5-10 minutes, reading the bolded lines, the subheadings, the keywords. It's all bolded and like that for a reason. It's important. The author wants you to know about it. Looking the keywords up, making a general sense of the chapter. And as soon as you consume this first layer of information, just skimming these things, you'll see how much easier it gets now to read the rest of the paragraphs. Now you go back to the start, and the second time you go through it all, the second layer of information you consume is the basic concepts, ignoring the overly complex things. Getting the overviews, establishing a baseline for whatever the basic stuff on the page is. It's a one-time go through. You go through things, you read this, okay, I get this, I get this, I get that, and whatever you understand, convert that into questions or make notes or whatever your process is. But then, oh, you've just come across a sentence that doesn't make sense. It is difficult, it's a bit harder than the rest of the stuff. So you think, let's just rote memorize it, at least I have it in my head for my tests. And that, as soon as you feel like you're rereading something, and as soon as you feel like the only way to make sense of a concept is to repeat it again and again until it's stuck in there, that's the sign that your brain is not ready to understand the information and take it in. So what you do is simple. You skip it, you move on for now, and you come back to it later. You can't just smash the information in your head with brute force. That's not how you effectively encode and learn things. Yes, you'll skip a lot initially, but that's okay. You'll come back to it in your next go through. And that's what you do. In your 3rd and 4th go through, you go back to the start and go through all the information that you skipped. All the hard concepts and difficult things and the details that you didn't once understand, you try and now give a go. But the difference is that now you've gone through this chapter twice. You've taken in the first 2 layers of information, and you'll know way more about this and have so much more prior knowledge than you did about 20 minutes ago when you first encountered these difficult, harder concepts. The stuff that you initially encountered and that didn't make sense, you'll now look at and go like, oh, I get this because this relates to the thing that I read later on. Oh, now I get it. This relates to this process. And you'll see that getting the basics of whatever you're reading that chapter before diving into the harder concepts just makes absorbing that information and organizing it in your head a lot easier. Because once you have that baseline, inserting the details on top of that baseline and then connecting them, oh, I'm relating this to that, that just makes organizing all of the information a lot better in your head, and hence it sticks for a lot longer as well. The key is to pick up the information in those layers. The easiest sentences first with the keywords and stuff, then the medium ones, the basic concepts, and then the 3rd layer, the harder concepts. Making sense of the things along the way. And each time you sweep through the whole chapter, you'll have more and more prior knowledge to back all the new stuff that you're learning. All you've done here is reordered the way that you consume this content. The same amount of detail, the same material, but the difference is now that harder concept that would have taken you like 20 minutes to just repeat, watch a YouTube video on, go back and make flashcards on and work on for like a week, now that concept will come naturally to you. Now, because you have all those dots of knowledge there and then, it'll just take 30 seconds for you to just connect them and understand that concept that you were struggling with. While you take this information in, you have to be quizzing yourself on it out loud. Testing yourself immediately accelerates your understanding of the topic, and it links with the whole concept of layering that we talked about as well. As you encode and understand the information in each layer, instead of just moving on to the next bit, stop. Do the classic cover test thing and test yourself. What have I just learned? What are the key bits of knowledge that I need to absorb from this paragraph? Explain it to yourself. Talk to yourself about it. Because if you can't do that, then you don't know if you've actually learned something or whether you've just read it and said, yeah, I got that. And the thing is, whenever I actually did this consciously, whenever I quizzed myself consciously, I just remembered that topic for so much more longer. And I remember that it always ended up being green on my recall questions whenever I tested myself. And I do get that the process of quizzing yourself and layering, none of this is natural. What's natural is just starting at page 1, line 1, and reading through it. But long term, I know this after experimenting with layering and this whole process of active recall while you learn, because I do this when I'm absorbing information for the first time, it saves me so much more time in the long run. I have to test myself a lot less and I have to revise the information a lot less before my exams. Yes, we've talked about testing yourself, it's vital, but using actual written questions during your learning, not after, during. That is also very important. I use questions in 2 ways. First, when I'm looking at the topic for the first time, taking that first layer of information in, I go to the back of the textbook and look at questions there. I don't actually answer them, I read through them. Remember, this is the first layer of information I've taken in. It's literally just me reading through keywords and then jumping to the back of the textbook to look at questions. And the reason I do this is so that I know what to pay attention to when I'm studying the chapter. There's a reason that the author of the book made questions on those specific topics, and the reason I'm reading them is so I can really focus on those topics that the author has written about. What did they think was important? What did they think we should have gained from reading this chapter? If I'm doing a lecture and there are no questions, then I open QuestMed and just load up that topic and look at the questions, and that's how I do it with those lectures. But always try and find some source of questions that you can just read through before you attack the concepts, because that way you know what's important and what's not. The second way I use questions is the actual practicing of them. I start and end all my big study sessions with doing my recall questions. For more technical subjects, I was speaking to a lot of my friends and most of them agreed that working and reworking a problem is much more valuable to them than just learning the content for that subject. So make sure to prepare or find those large lists of questions from your course material and textbooks and then practice them regularly during your study sessions. I don't usually work for longer than 4 hours on a normal day, but that's not how I started. Deep work is defined as focused, distraction-free work on a task. And when I first came across this in Cal Newport's book, Deep Work, I was very skeptical of this because I was like, how can anyone just be focused 100% of the time when they're studying? But I realized that it doesn't mean being focused for those 14-hour periods in the library. Deep work doesn't last that long. It usually lasts around 2 to 3 hours. And what I've learned is practically you need to do 2 things to get you started off with deep work. 1, schedule in a simple, consistent 3 to 4 hour time blocked period where all you do is focus on your tasks, the main bulk of the things that you need to get done that day. And second, you do this so much that you consistently build up and you train yourself to not get distracted during those 3 to 4 hours that you schedule. As soon as I started to stick to those 3 to 4 hours of work after classes on a daily basis, my work rate just skyrocketed after those first few weeks of trying this out. And it's simply because I was scheduling those 3 to 4 hours and the rest of the time I'd make sure I was doing other things. I'd meet up with friends, I'd go to gym, I'd be making food, I'd be doing this YouTube thing. And because of Parkinson's law, I now want to finish all the stuff that I want to do in that deep work 3 to 4 hour block of time. And that's how you start. You just give yourself less time to study, those 3 to 4 hours of extreme focus time, and you think to yourself, I'm not going to get distracted, this is going to be my productive time, I'm going to sit down, work in my environment, whatever it is, with music on, however you do it, just get all the stuff I can done and make the most out of it. And over time, the more you do this, your speed will increase, your productivity will increase, and you'll just become more efficient with the things you want to do. One thing though is that eliminating distractions for me is still difficult. Having a completely distraction-free study session, it never happens. And I know that Cal Newport and Deep Work and all these other productivity people online say that in order to be efficient, you have to be able to resist all forms of distractions. But I think that some days of the week it's just impossible to not get distracted by random things. And I have reflected on this and I have thought a lot about this, and I think that it's to do with my goals and my aims with medical school slowly changing. But all in all, I've realized that having that discipline to bring myself back to work after I get distracted that's all that matters. Because it isn't about getting distracted, it's how fast you can recognize what happened and then bring yourself back to what you want to be doing in that moment. Despite getting distracted randomly, it isn't actually difficult to bring myself back to my work because I genuinely enjoy medical school and all the work we do so much. So as long as I stick to that strict 4-hour deep work period, whenever I do that in the week, that's when I know that I'll get all my stuff done and it all becomes a lot more doable. We've talked a lot about the understanding process of learning, but the second step to learning, the equally important step, is retrieval. And I think that the best video to teach you about that is this one right here. I've gotten a lot of positive feedback about this one, and it's because I show people a very specific and realistic way to implement active recall in their daily studying. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this helped. I'll see you in the next one.